Welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We are broadcasting from everywhere. We're just all over the place this week. We're going to be talking Belgian beers this week. A hot topic, a special place in all of our hearts, because I know a lot of us probably started in the early days of craft beer. A lot of Belgians were a lot of that. You know, that's what was available. That's what you drank. But I am Tim Dennis. Brian Hewitt's here with me. Brian, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Tim, I am doing great. Joining us today, we have John Roberts, a.k.a. JR, a.k.a. Beer Dad from Bold Monk. And we've got Brian Purcell, the founder of Three Taverns Brewery. And we're going to talk about Belgian ales, like you were saying, everything related to them, and maybe a little bit about last week's Belgian Beer Festival. But before we get into that, we've got Mo Mike Nate with us as well. How you doing, Mo Mike?
Doing well. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
We're making it through. We've got two Brians in here, so I'll go with the Beeps. Beeps, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good. Settling in here with St. Bernardus Abbott 12, and got you guys in front of me. Looking forward to some good conversation with some beer lovers. So it doesn't get much better than that.
Worst places to be on a Wednesday, right?
100%.
Absolutely. JR, how are
I've been
you,
in
sir?
most of them.
Yeah, no doubt. JR, how's it going today, sir?
Going pretty well. I was just canning some Belgian beer today. Had to can up our quad and our triple.
A little bit of that happens at the Bold Monk, right? A little bit of Belgian beer. Yeah.
Been known to.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think let's get kicked off. But you actually hosted a festival this weekend, JR, at your Bold Monk Brewery, Belgians in the Garden. And you've got a really cool beer garden there. But can you just kind of give us an overview of the fest?
Sure. We had a great time on Saturday. We decided to do the festival in the evening, 5 to 9, which worked out really good. It was nice and cool there, and everybody had a great time. I just really wanted to have a festival that promoted Belgian beer and got people thinking more about Belgian beer. Belgian breweries and Belgian brewers, to me, were the original craft brewers. They operated with no nets, and they did what they wanted to do. They didn't have many guidelines. Of course, the Trappists have their styles, but they didn't really have anything telling them what to do. And the result is having a small little country in Europe that has the most amount of beers that you can possibly imagine. And the flavors are from one end of the spectrum to the other.
No pesky Rheinhaskebot over there, right?
What's that?
I said no pesky Rheinhaskebot over there.
No, none of that, which, that had its place as well.
Sure.
I wonder what stopped other countries. You've got Germany, Austria would have been under that, Bavaria, however, that was divided up. And Belgium didn't have it, but there are other countries around. It's interesting that Belgium had a particular explosion in creativity in beer, and maybe you don't see quite as much of that in other places, though arguably some of like the Scandinavian farmhouse ales may be along those lines too, just not quite as consolidated or as promoted maybe.
Well,
I'm not sure what that is.
I think a lot of it had to do with the water people had. I mean, in Great Britain, you had a certain hard water, and it lent itself to brewing certain types of beers, namely pale ales and things like that. And that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, Czech Republic, of course, it was part of Bavaria, but it has particularly soft water that lends itself very well to brewing pale lagers. So I think people kind of went with what they knew and what they knew would work well, until more recently, when, of course, we have science and all that fun stuff to help us modify our water to be the way we want it to be.
See, I think that's great that and just like you said, JR, you brewed with what you had there. And if you brewed a pale ale and it's like, oh, this isn't good, then you don't brew it again. You go back to the beer that tastes good there. And interesting, we'll have to dive into this. This can be a topic probably for its own show, but there's been some chatter on the internet lately about terroir in beer. And an article came out with one person saying it was bullocks. And, we had actually talked to Stan Hieronymus about that before, and he disagreed with that. So that's been the back and forth right now. Is it
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
And
Stan would definitely disagree with that.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And, like you said, there were definitely back then the terroir played in. Your Belgian beer was going to be a certain type, and your
Absolutely.
German beers and all that. So it's I think even now, just like Stan said, I'm on Stan's team on this one. There's definite terroir there, and
Oh, absolutely.
it may not be quite what it is in wine, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all there.
Right. I
So,
mean, there's terroir in breweries in the United States, the West
sure.
Coast, East Coast, Southern,
Yeah.
Northern. They all have their own flavor components that will identify the beer. I mean, sure, you can
Right.
get them close, but I think the terroir has a lot to do with it.
And I don't know if this would be terroir necessary or not, but like Sweetwater, a Sweetwater IPA, I'm 90% confident I could blind pick a Sweetwater IPA in a lineup.
Well, you've probably had a lot of Sweetwater
I've
IPA.
definitely had a lot of those, but one that I do think the terroir plays into is Jester King. Like their
Yes.
culture definitely has its own character that, you drink a Jester King beer, and when we go international, Dry Fontaine or Cantillon or any of those, I can drink a Dry Fontaine, and there's a common taste even through their different beers. You know that this
Absolutely.
is a draw. And just as a side note, we happen to set our booth up at your festival right next to the Cantillon and the Dry Fontaine and the Orval. And
The Merchant Duvet.
Yeah, I wondered
table.
why all that stuff disappeared so quickly.
yeah, it was a very strategic move. We're proud of
Yeah.
that one, JR. We made a wise decision there for sure.
Somebody was busting on us about saying, "Hey, Belgian instead of Belgian style ales," and they're like, "You, all I see on the list is Delirium," and I don't remember one other. There were so many different Belgian ales represented at that one table, and
True.
ones that were really sought after, like Sang Bleu from Cantillon and Rose de Gambrinus. They has a
Right.
Creek from Drufonteinen. That
Yeah,
that
we have
table
3 different
alone was
Fontans.
worth the price of admission. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you
No,
saying?
it's fine. I said we had at least 3 different Dry Fontaine. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely not just Delirium for sure. Although that we had 2 great Deliriums there. Yeah, I saw that comment from before.
Yeah, and you know what? I respect the comment. Pay
Yeah.
homage to it. I'm like, oh yeah, I get where you're saying from, but Belgian style beers in the garden didn't quite roll off the tongue quite the same.
Well, I mean,
so,
normally I would probably be the one to say, "Hey, that's not Belgian; it's Belgian
Yeah.
style." We like to say Belgian inspired these days
right.
because I think that really means more than saying Belgian style. And it's Belgian inspired beer is what we strive for at Bold Monk.
Yeah, and it definitely comes into play when you start talking Americans brewing their versions of lambics and that that.
Oh yeah.
You get that we have the method traditionnel that they came up with. Yeah, we had a long discussion with, I think it may have been Crooked Stave, I think, about just the terms used, all these terms for it, and we talked about like American Wild Ale, lambic inspired, what have you there, because they've been kind of blanket term thrown in as sour beers, and there's such a variety there that you really can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I really kind of hate the term sour. I know
Yeah.
it's kind of a necessary thing that they've come to expect now, but sour has so many negative connotations. Maybe we've changed it through usage lately, but I've always tried to come up with the proper American term for it, but always kind of fall short.
Yeah,
I think tart's the closest thing I can think
Tart,
of. Like
yeah.
tart is
Tart
can be a
beers.
positive thing. And like, oh yeah, it's
Absolutely.
got some nice fruit tartness. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. Like, oh, it's sour. I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I do, as a guy who likes pickles and lambics and everything else, sour. I'm like, that could be really good. I mean, I'm interested then when you say the sour. So just getting people's heads around it. It's the same way that the term bitter sometimes has a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to. And in some cases, it talks about a beer that isn't actually particularly bitter. It's a term. It's a little bit of education and experience. So yeah,
Well,
I agree with you.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. People need to learn what the different terms are. Bitterness doesn't mean that it's going to be necessarily bitter. It's just a perceived level that brewers use to make sure it's the same every time.
You know what?
But
Though,
we use those words in negative ways if you think about it.
Yeah.
Dude,
Right.
well,
yeah, they're
nobody wants to
sour
be
and
around
bitter.
or don't be,
Yeah.
Or-
you know. So they're not words describe something positive.
People talk about people being salty. That's sour and salty both.
Oh well.
Double whammy.
Yeah.
They hate these beers.
They
That's right.
hate these
Yeah.
beers.
You know, Brian Purcell talking about that. If I hear someone talk about the bitterness, oh, this has got nice bitterness, I'm going to avoid that beer. I appreciate that descriptor because I know that one's not for me. It's
Yeah.
I don't. You say West Coast, I'm just going to steer clear, and that's about
That's
all.
where I
Right.
steer too.
That's is that a long-standing tradition of yours, Tim?
Me, it is. Yes, it absolutely is. When we started the show, Brian, the Northeast hype hadn't really started yet. So when you said IPA, it was known that it was going to be like a West Coast style for the most part.
Sure.
So when we started the show, I just don't like IPAs. That was just kind of my blanket statement. I don't like IPAs because 97% of the time I wasn't going to care for it if it was an IPA, and then they started softening it a little bit. And I think sometimes the dip is balanced out that bitterness a little bit where I'm like, okay, I can handle that. So it's something where I'll try them because every now and then there's some that break my rule, but I'm fairly safe in just again blanket staying away from most West Coast and that. So
It's a
good for
character
me.
flaw.
Yeah. Y'all, we've got a question here, so let's throw it up real quick before we move on. We've got Cheers to Beers Beer Reviews says, besides popularity, is there any reason a small taproom brewery might not have any Belgians in their lineup?
Sure, they don't know how to make it.
Yep.
There you
Sorry,
go.
did I say
Good
that out
reason
loud?
right there.
It's an intimidating style of beer to make if you haven't really practiced it. If you haven't taken the time to really understand the nuances that make a Belgian beer world class, you could, stub your toe and look like a fool.
Yeah, and
so-
I think the other reason mostly is because Belgian beers aren't perceived as the popular beer styles these days.
Sure.
And maybe they're
Yeah.
not, but they're what I like to make, so that's what I make.
Are they
Yeah.
more expensive typically? Like you'd have to get maybe candy sugar for that than you wouldn't have to get it normally, or
They're definitely not more expensive than a East Coast IPA or fruited sour or something like that, where you've got all this money tied up in your fruit or your hops or anything like that. They might be more expensive with malt now, or a little more expensive with malt, but still not more expensive than the beers that
Yeah, nothing gets more expensive than those hazy,
oh my god,
Yeah.
double dry hop, triple dry hop beers.
Yeah.
Those,
is there a calculation of per haze droplet, like how much that costs in a beer?
depends on how much yield you get.
Brian's getting pedantic over there,
Yeah.
really breaking it down. Yeah. No,
I will be a jerk about these things. I'm sorry.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
my character flaw.
And
I
many
love
other
West Coast
things.
IPAs though. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, that was always something. Brian, he loves those. I don't. So we seem to make it. We do okay when we go to a tap room. There's always something there that we enjoy. But Brian Purcell, when you started Three Taverns Craft Brewery, your focus was Belgians, and you've kind of expanded, morphed a little bit since then. But
evolved.
Evolved. There we go.
Evolved. JR would probably say I'm a turncoat, but
Devolved there.
to each his own. Devolved.
No,
No, I mean, I was a home brewer, and I made a lot of different styles of beers. I love to make IPAs, and but I was really fascinated with Belgian beer culture. I had discovered Belgian beers in Belgium, and then rediscovered a Trappist ale at the Brickstore Pub before the law changed in Georgia, and and I was like, yeah, this is a beer, and you couldn't get those beers in the U.S. at that time, because they were
Right.
too. Or let me stand correct. You couldn't get those beers in Georgia, so if I wanted those beers, I was going to have to learn to make them, and I always found them to be some of the most challenging beers to make well, to make to the standards of the Trappist monks or just any of those really good Belgian breweries. There's an art to Belgian brewing that I think a lot of American brewers miss when they're trying to make a Belgian beer. The Belgian beers finish really dry.
Yes.
And it's deceptive because the Belgian strains of yeast produce esters during fermentation, and these esters are sweet. Some of them taste like fruit, dried fruit, or dark fruit, or candy. They actually use esters to give flavor to sugar-free candies and sugar-free gums. So different esters have different flavors to them, and those are a natural byproduct in the Belgian brewing. So when you're drinking a Belgian beer, a really well-made Belgian beer, there's a perceived sweetness that's coming from the esters. But when you swallow, it's the actual sweetness is really low. So it's not a sticky sweetness. It's not a filling sweetness,
Right.
which makes them dangerously drinkable because you can drink a 10%, like I'm drinking here, the St. Bernardus quad. It's 10% and it's sweet to the taste, but not sweet to the stomach. And it goes down really easy. And it's delicious. So, and I think that, and JR, you can probably agree with this or not, but I think a lot of American brewers, especially those that don't have a lot of experience or haven't spent the time to really understand Belgian beers or Belgian brewing, they finish their beers too sweet. They
far
don't.
too sweet.
Yeah, they not only taste sweet from the esters, they actually finish sweet, and it's that was my common experience. So as a home brewer, I was really worked hard and failed miserably over and over to get the beer to dry out as much as it should. So finally, when I launched 3 Taverns, I thought, well, my only avenue for success here is to get out of the way and bring a Belgian brewer over from Belgium, and had the good fortune to be introduced to Joran van Hinderacter, who everyone knows now is one of the co-owners of Halfway Crooks, and was able to lure him to the U.S. and help me start 3 Taverns. So and he was a commercially trained brewer, and pretty good at what he did. So
Darn good start for sure.
He
And
does a good job,
we had a
yeah.
comment. We did have a comment here in the chat. Same thing you're saying there, Brian, about that American brewers just don't let their Belgian beers attenuate down far enough. That's from Eric
Right.
Gruber. You know,
I
just got
think
to
the thing,
dry
one of
them
the
out more.
problems American brewers do typically is they overcomplicate the malt profile. They try to use every malt under the sun, trying to get all these flavors out of it, when all they have to do is keep the malt very simple and let the yeast sing. And I've often said that, and it's exactly what Brian's saying. You get to let the yeast express itself and let the beer dry out, and everything will be fine.
You know, JR, I'm going to call it over attenuated that because it sounds nicer, but I have a little score sheet from a homebrew competition where you got one of my gushers. I think it may have
Got one of
been,
your gushers.
I think it may have been you and Owen Ogletree that
I think I remember that.
yeah, got one of my saison or our saisons that Brian and I brewed, and we were, and with a home brewer, we drank that one, of course, before we sent it out, and it was great. The ones we had weren't gushers, of course. The one we send off to competition is, but
saisons are kind of complex because they're
yeah,
technically not really Belgian. They're from the border of Belgium and France, but the yeasts tend to be STA positive, which means it has diastaticus in it. And for you to have a gusher there is not all that big a deal because diastaticus will ferment everything out. It doesn't matter what
chew it
you
up.
do.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Wasn't that an issue with some of the yeast strains that were coming from commercial suppliers to homebrewers?
It was, and
yeah,
it's not something anybody even tested for before. And then they started getting it in a lot of different yeast strains, and it really screwed up a lot of beer for a while. And then now everybody tests for it. So, but you still want it in some beers like saison.
Yeah.
It being over attenuated, over carbonated is not necessarily a bad thing in a saison. I almost kind of expect it. If it's a little if it's the opposite way, I'm a little disappointed. It's just
Right.
that's delivering aroma, which an aroma is part of flavor. So
Absolutely.
you want that if you can get it.
That effervescence is nice for sure. Y'all, we have a question here. We're going to hold this when we have a question about the differences in quads, doubles, and triples, and that is on the agenda for tonight.
Okay.
So we'll answer that question in a little bit. I'm going to talk about our beers of the week real quick here, and we want to thank our friends at the Nest for sponsoring this segment. Craft Beer Barbecue, Kennesaw, Georgia. Wings, ribs, all the good stuff that you need right there. Go check them out before it gets too much hotter, because we know heat waves moving across. They've got a gorgeous patio there that you can set on and enjoy your meal and a cold beer. Brian, you and I always hang out in the bar area because the beers are closer that way.
That's right. Yeah.
They've got a nice big board behind the bar that shows all the beers on tap. You can just go up there, call it off, and the friendly servers will have it to you very quickly. So if you're in the area, even if you're not, come to Atlanta, go to Kennesaw, go to the Nest, get you some beer and barbecue. You're going to have a good time. So tonight for our beers, we've got Brian, you pre-gamed with an Orval from 22 there. So got that.
Nice.
We have a little cellar action here from Three Taverns and the Brick Store.
I'm
Total
trying to get
BS.
it to show up.
Oh,
It's not showing.
Total BS. A Brett Saison there.
Nice.
So, Brian's got an Oud Goose Boone 2016-2017 there. Also from Bold Monk, The Virtue of Patience, the Flanders Red. From Liability Brewing, we have a stainless steel Magnolias, which is a Kolsch, which is most definitely not a Belgian beer, Nate. So, and
None of mine are. I'm sorry.
and one of the most well-loved Belgian beers, Guinness Draft. So that's
Do
what
they
we've
have
got on
Guinness
deck
set
there.
up shop everywhere else in the world? I didn't look into it. Is Guinness in Belgium making beer? I wouldn't be surprised. Or is it just
I don't think
is
so.
Ireland too close? Like, can they just ship it?
I'm going to one up everybody. I've got a Westy 12 right here. I'm
Oh, okay. All right.
well, except for Brian. They're
The
pretty
Belgian
much brothers.
That's
Yeah.
true.
You know
Yeah.
what? I don't think I've ever tasted those side by side. And you hear so many people that say the Abbott 12 and Westy 12.
Well, speaking of a gusher. There
Oh,
we go.
see, even Westy. See,
well, so
we know
you
how you
probably
feel,
know
monks.
this, or you may not, but the Abbott 12, the St. Bernardus, used to contract brew for West Valderen.
Yeah.
So the West Valderen and the West Valderen beer had this logo here, and it was but he had a little hat on his head that signified Trappist. And so
Okay.
when West Valderen, when the law changed and you had to maintain your Trappist signification, you had to brew in the abbey in your on site. And West Valderen built an abbey on site and started brewing their beer themselves. So that's why the beers taste so similar. But what St. Bernardus had to do was they had to take they kept the logo and just changed their name to St. Bernardus from West Valderen and continued to make the same beer they were making for West Valderen. And they just had to take the little hat off of the monk. It's a little history there.
A little history lesson there. That's good.
Yeah.
I did not realize that actually was at one point the Westy logo. I didn't realize that. I knew that there was contract brewing going on.
Yeah.
I knew they split ways, and I didn't as to whether or not it was exactly the same recipe. I think there's been a little bit of debate on that, but I have reasons to believe it would be similar because.
Well, why wouldn't you? You were brewing it already, so
right? Yeah,
it was your
It's the same
recipe. You know, You're not going to quit. You're not going to change anything. And the reason I know that is because I toured West Valderen. I mean, I toured St. Bernardus when I was on a Belgian trip right before I started Three Taverns, and they have in their on their display they have bottles with this St. Bernardus label that say West Valderen on it, and so I learned the whole history of that. It's pretty fascinating.
That's pretty cool. Those are always fun to go in and kind of see behind the curtain there.
Mm-hmm.
The Wizard of Oz of Belgian beer kind of thing there.
So when was that? Was that around the time you were getting acquainted with the Belgian beers in general, or was that much later?
Oh, much later. Yeah, I was trying to raise money to build out Three Taverns, and it just coincided. And so and my wife and I decided we have to plan a trip to Belgium before I start this Belgian style brewery. And she was the one that said, you have to do it before you start the brewery, because if you don't, you'll never go. And I mean, she was right about that. So we planned it, and the week before I left for Belgium, we ended up finishing out raising the money for the brewery. So it was a great trip because I knew I was going to come back and get started building out the brewery. And, we just traveled around Belgium, and we stayed at the St. Bernardus Inn, which is, they have an inn right there beside the brewery. And then you can ride a bike from St. Bernardus to West Vleteren. The bike ride back was one of the most glorious moments of my life.
I was going to say, that sounds
as
tricky.
you can imagine.
It's like all full on quads, and you're just like flying.
Right. Oh, I have a picture of me riding the bike with no hands. It was great.
Brian's out there doing a Double Mint commercial on the ride back there. So yeah. I feel like that may be a joke that St. Bernardus likes to play, is making bikes available to go to Westies. It's like, yeah,
You
sure.
gotta bring it back.
Sure,
Right.
go there. Right. Exactly. Well, guys, talking Belgian beer styles, I think a lot of us know probably the common. You've got your singles, your doubles, your triples, your quads. They make it easy for us with the naming style there. And again, the earlier question we had, kind of segueing into that, what is the difference in these? Is the main difference just the ABV in these beers?
Primarily.
JR, you want to take that one, sir?
Yeah, I mean, primarily, the singles are kind of something that's done primarily in the monastery for the monks. They call it Pater beer.
Pater's beer, yeah.
But we've kind of adopted that a little bit and taken some liberties with it and made it a pale ale version of it, a Belgian pale ale version that's lighter. Doubles, it's pretty standard. It's your brown beer that's between 6.5% and 8.5%. 8.5 on the high end there. It's kind of got a caramel character to it, a little bit of coffee notes underlying, but it's just very drinkable. It pairs well with all food. I think it's the most food friendly beer I've ever come across. And then you get into triples, which didn't come around until probably the 1920s or so, I believe it was, when they were trying to compete with the pale beers of Czech Republic and Germany. And, as most Belgian brewers do, they made it much stronger. And it was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think West Vleteren or Westmalle actually was the first one. And everything took over from there. It's a little paler. It's not. It varies from a straw-colored beer, which is not as common in Belgium, to a more amber-colored beer, which is more common. And then the quad, which really isn't a beer style, at least it wasn't until recently. But it's more commonly referred to as a Belgian dark strong. Americans, of course, latched onto the quad name, which was really just a determination by a Belgian brewer to make it the special double of the year, which is extra strong. And they tend to go from 10% and up, or 9.5% and up. So that's kind of the basic rundown there.
Yeah, just real quick, if you watch Michael Jackson, the Beer Hunter, his in the mid '80s, he had a show called The Beer Hunter on public television. I think it was just a few episodes, and you can get those. But and he went into the Belgian breweries. There were no quads at that time.
No,
none of the breweries had quads. So the strong dark started, as I understand it, and John, you can add to this, but it started outside of the Belgian brewery.
Yeah.
And so outside of the Trappist.
The Trappist brewery,
Trappist breweries. So when the Trappists decided, well, hey, let's make this style of beer too, instead of calling it strong dark, of course, they're going to stay with their single,
Exactly.
double, triple. So we called it a quad. So it was really the same style that was being brewed outside of the monastery walls that was being called the strong dark at the time. But now in America, it's like two different styles. So,
You know, JR, one of
we
our
complicate everything.
you know,
It's
one of
That's-
our friend Brian, hold on, please.
okay.
It's a JR, one of our friends, Crawford Moran, when he had 5 seasons, he actually did a quint there.
Yeah.
So that's, you know,
That's
go
Crawford.
5.
That's
Yeah.
right.
To the excessive.
The special bottles with the 55 on them or the 5s all over them. I'd forgotten
Yeah,
about that.
quintessence, I believe.
That's
that
right.
was it.
That's
Yeah,
what
he
that
was just
was.
trying to get us all drunk.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
He knew
Exactly.
if we got drunk, we'd hang around and eat longer, and that was just win-win for him. So,
Or hang around and pass out, either way.
or that.
One of the two, or both. Both.
Now, Brian, you said that the strong dark and the quad are actually a different thing, or
no, they're like the same thing. It's
okay,
just-
all right. I thought I heard that you said they were
the
different.
Trappists just gave it their own name, which was quad, because that
Right.
was in keeping with the way they named their beers.
Yeah, I believe Kona Shaven was the first one to name
They
it.
were. Yeah,
Okay.
they were. I think the first one to do it, to
Yeah.
make one.
Now, leaving the lambics and goos out of it, because that's kind of a side conversation there, are there any forgotten, long-lost Belgian beer styles, or is it, you know, pretty
Ooh.
standard block there for the Belgians?
Yeah, you know, I can't think of one off the top of my head because they're long lost. But
That's then yes, maybe
There you go.
maybe is the answer there. So,
Still lost.
Yeah, there was only one beer hunter, and he's no longer with us.
he's gone. He's gone, man. You know,
There-
every
there-
now and then I see some pop up on a blog or something. It's like, hey, here's this style. I'm like, how have I never heard of this before? And they're like, 400 years ago on one small farm
Right.
in Norway, they brewed this. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, there's definitely a lot of styles that people don't know about, and that's kind of the beauty of Belgian beer. It's like outside of the Trappist monasteries, there's all kinds of Belgian beer that vary in flavor and everything. I mean, there's the Belgian reds, and you know, there's just so many different permutations because everybody does their own thing, and everything's different. And I don't even know if you call it a style so much as it's just a different beer.
And there's even a Belgian Pilsner, I believe, and it never crossed my mind that was a thing until fairly recently, and I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a new thing. That kind of
Is it
an
newer?
American
What?
kind of thing.
What makes a Belgian Pilsner?
They make it in
And I-
Belgium.
Well, because here's my
They use Belgian ingredients.
well, because my experience with that is when Joran and I were still together with 3 Taverns, and we had only made beers using Belgian yeast at that time. So that was our distinctive Belgian style using Belgian yeast. And the World Cup was coming to you know, I forget what year that was. 2014, was that 14 or 16?
I believe so.
And anyway,
Me.
so we decided let's brew a beer to commemorate the World Cup, because Joran was really excited. The Belgian Red Devils were one of the favored teams going into the World Cup, and so I was like, okay, so what do you want to brew? And he said a Pilsner. I was like, a Pilsner? I said, that's not Belgian. He said, that's what we drink in Belgium when we're watching football.
It's
and in
true.
fact, what I learned is it's like everywhere else in the world, the most dominant style of beer in Belgium is still the Pilsner. And it's not, and that's why I say a Belgian Pilsner, it's like there's no such thing. It's like a Pilsner made in America versus a Pilsner made in the Czech Republic versus a Pilsner made in Belgium versus a Pilsner made in Germany. It's a Pilsner. It's a Pilsner style. However you want to look at it, it's like, the only way you could make it a Belgian Pilsner is to throw, I guess, Belgian yeast in it, and then it's no longer a Pilsner. So
That was going to be my. Okay, I was going to ask that. So even in Belgium, because I think Americans, you say Belgian beer, and yeast is the first thing. You know, that yeast character.
Sure.
It is.
But in Belgium, their Pilsner, they're still brewing that clean, just like a Pilsner.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
Stella Artois has been made in Belgium for a long time, and it's made with a German yeast, as far as I know. Possibly a Czech yeast, but
Yeah, yeah. We
Well,
got talking.
and Joran said at the time, I said, "Well, can you brew a good pilsner?" I'll never forget this. Joran's like, "I can brew a good pilsner," and that's
See,
you
yeah,
know, and that was the birth of Prince of Pilsen, which, but we made it a hoppy pilsner, so we made it we kind of Americanized it in terms of the hop character, but that's what I think 50% of the production of the Belgian brewery he worked at the time was Pilsner. So that's where he learned to make a Czech style Pilsner or German style. I don't, it's one or the other.
Right.
It was in
the Czech
Belgium.
style Pilsner from Belgium. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Night on Ponce, which
Yes,
before Night on Ponce there was a night in Brussels, correct?
that's correct.
And Night on Ponce, for those not in Atlanta, Ponce de Leon Avenue here in Atlanta, big area, well known, culturally significant. So, if I understand correctly, that was just essentially Night in Brussels with an American yeast. Is that right?
Originally, yes.
Okay,
Correct.
and that from what I've heard, was more popular than anticipated. Was that kind of a turning point for Three Taverns?
It was. It was. So we were making Belgian beers. I didn't have the luxury of JR and having this beautiful space with a restaurant and
Right.
being able to rely on premise sales is my primary means of supporting. We were a distro brewery and trying to sell Belgian beers through distro. And at the time that I launched this Belgian style brewery, was kind of the beginning of when you saw the regard or the affection, the celebration of Belgian style start to diminish as more and more American breweries were experimenting and trying their own thing. And so it got harder and harder to sell the Belgian beers. And as if I had been a small taproom brewery selling, I might have been fine. But trying to sell my beer into through distro, into grocery chains and beer and liquor stores.
It's worth
Yes.
noting you couldn't be a small taproom brewery at the time.
That's correct. You couldn't. The laws were different. We couldn't sell beer out of our tap room, so we had to go through distribution, and it was really tough. And at a certain point, I said to Joran, we were sitting and I said, Joran, I think it's time that we took the Belgian yeast off of a night in Brussels, which was basically a night in Brussels was in some ways, parts of it were American IPA and parts of it were Belgian IPA. The malt bill was Belgian. We used candy sugar, or cane sugar, and but the hop profile was more American. We had Citra hops were in it, and but we used Belgian yeast. So I used to call it a Belgian or an American IPA on the Belgian road trip. Is how I described that beer. Yeah. And so I said to him, I think it's time that we took the Belgian yeast off, put American yeast on this recipe and see what it tastes like. And at first he was very resistant. No, I think it's not a good idea. And I said, well, I'm just talking about experimenting with it first. Let's see what it tastes like. And I don't know if he remembers it this way, but the next day he came in and he said, well, if we're going to do it, let's just do it. Let's make a 30-barrel batch and send it to market. And that's what we did. And that's when a night on Ponce was born. So because I thought, well, it's a night in Brussels. If we're going to take the Belgian yeast off, put American yeast, it needs to really mirror. It needs to be an American mirror, a local mirror. And so we were not too far from Ponce, and Ponce being such an iconic street, I thought, well, a night on Ponce is a good, contrast to the night in Brussels. And many of us have had a night on Ponce. It comes in a myriad of shapes and sizes. And so anyway, that's how that beer was born. Now, over the years, the malt bills changed. It's because the malt bill was still really made for Belgian yeast, and so over time we tweaked that. And Neil in fact, has tweaked it a good bit himself since he's been on board. And I think a Night on Ponce is drinking better than it ever has. It's a really good American IPA. So
I think that hit the market really well. That style of beer when that came out was really popular. And of course, Night on Ponce, like you said, we've had a Night on Ponce. We remember the fact that we were there. We may forget the details of the Night on Ponce that we had, but I think the name really, drew people into it. Excellent can art, which is also a very cool piece of it as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed that beer for sure. I enjoyed the Belgians.
We just brewed a night in Brussels. So Neil brewed a night in Brussels, and which was great because I gave him range. He didn't have, and so he adjusted the recipe and made it his own, and he used Orval yeast on it, and we sent some out, and JR was able to pour it at the Belgian Beer Festival, and
yeah, it's great.
Neil said it did really well. He really knocked it out of the park. It's delicious, and it will be pouring at the Brickstore Pub on Saturday for their 26th anniversary.
26th anniversary.
And what's cool about that is we turned 10 years this year. And we launched, because we didn't have a tap room at the time, we launched at the Brickstore Pub in July of 2013 with a night in Brussels and Single Intent, which was our version of a Belgian single. So
good stuff. All good beers, man. Enjoy them all. Very
cool.
much so. Awesome. We want to take a quick 1 minute, exactly 1 minute, or pretty darn close to it, to thank the sponsors of the Beer Guys Radio Show. They help us do this every week along with our awesome Patreons. Brian, what you got for us, sir?
So I have a shout out to our longtime friend and sponsor, Truck and Tap. So if you've known us for a while, you've known us, you know about them because we talk about them all the time. But in case you didn't, they're all about Truck and Tap, all about the fusion of the latest, freshest beer on tap with a great rotating lineup of food trucks. Anything from one day to the next, lobsters to tacos to Cajun food to, I don't know, anything you can think of just about. It's hard to beat. Each location has a different tap list and they have a different food truck, and you can see what's happening at each location on their website at truckandtap.com. I mean, thanks to the website, I went and looked at it. I know that they have North Coast's Old Rasputin on Nitro at the Alpharetta location, and so I might have to run up there and go get some of that because that is very relevant to my personal interests. But, if Alfred is not convenient for you, they have other options. They got locations in Woodstock. They've got Duluth. They got taps at Feast in the Battery, Atlanta. You've got options on top of options. So you pick the option that suits you, and you can have a great time at Truck and Tap. Thank you, Truck and Tap.
Brian, and whatever your taste, beer or food, they got something for you. Make the rounds.
For
there.
sure.
I had a big old plate of oxtails and plantains at their Alpharetta location one time. Sat out there and had some good, Jamaican food, drinking a beer. It's a good time, man. It's a good time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brian, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Terrapin Brewery Atlanta at the Battery. Very cool location. And you know what? You can double down. You can go to Taps at Feast and then walk a block down the road and visit the Terrapin Tap Room right there at the Battery. They're always doing fun stuff. They're kind of the brew lab for Terrapin Breweries. So before the new beers hit the rotation and go out to the masses, you can go to the brew lab and see what's cooking there, see what's coming up next. So we know that they've got a Kolsch that we sampled off the Bright Tank a couple weeks ago, Brian. It'll be hitting the tap soon. And they mentioned that they've done several big batches of that should keep it on for a while. Kolsch is a great drinking beer through the summer.
For sure.
Good hot weather beer, get that up. They also did one called Double Date, which we actually got to sample at JR's festival this weekend. So a Belgian double with dates there, but always something new and good on there. Whatever your style is, they're going to have you a Pilsner. They're going to have you a good IPA. They're going to have a nice stout on there. They're going to have interesting things. Another fun thing they do, they've done several collaborations with Braves players before. So Chipper Jones had a CJ10 that went on there. Jeff Francoeur did Frenchie's Blues. And I actually forget the one they're working right now, but they have an ex-Braves player that I believe they said that he has a farm with some hives, beehives. And
An apiary.
An apiary, and they're using his honey in a beer there that they're brewing at the Terrapin Atlanta Brewery. So all kinds of good stuff. They've got a gluten-reduced IPA coming. So if you have gluten issues and you drank something like Omission and it doesn't bother you, the process they're using is similar. When we were there, they said they just sent it off to make sure that they can use that gluten reduced and it would be safe for people who could drink those kind of beers. So they're looking out for all of us there. Terrapin Brewery Atlanta, thanks for sponsoring the Beer Guys Radio Show. Now I think we got some more Belgian beer talk to dive into here. You know, we talked JR Saisons. We want to talk Saisons because that is one that you said is kind of it rides the border there. A lot of people look at those as Belgian beers, but it's French, Belgio-French, correct?
Yeah, Franco-Belgian. Yes.
Franco-Belgian. There we go. So, but that's one of our personal favorite styles. We enjoy that, and I think a lot of times it is, you know, Saison DuPont, kind of the classic Saison. There is a good one.
Well, I mean, Saison encompasses a lot of beers. A lot of people think of them strictly as the farmhouse beers with the funk and the Brett and everything else going on in them. But Saison is anything from a super light drinking beer with a little bit of phenolics to it to a dark beer that's, you know, super alcoholic, or a light beer that's super alcoholic. It's a style that encompasses a lot. Saying Saison kind of brings up certain connotations to most people, but Saisons definitely cover the gamut.
Broad, yeah. We enjoyed that when we were brewing. That it did, you know, we did a basic Saison. I think we were a little on the boozier side. Wasn't our base around 8%, Brian? Like what our base Saison was?
It was up there, and we did a long boil on it, and there was. I think that we weren't shy when it came to booze, but there was a lot of flexibility there. And I came up with a recipe that was, I think I called it Noel Noir. That was heavily on it was Saison yeast, but very much darker. Well, I was going for that darker angle to see what we could do with that, and that was a very interesting thing.
Cool. I mean, I think, you know, Saison, you know, originated as the people's beer, as they called it. It was a beer made for farmhands when they were harvesting the harvest.
Harvesting the harvest.
Yes,
that's what you do. It has to be done.
It has to be done. And they would brew it in the wintertime and store it in barrels and then break it out for the farmhands as they were harvesting the harvest. In the summer, in spring, and it was generally a very light alcohol beer back then, but it's come to be a lot more now.
Well, you put anything in the hands of Brian and Tim, and
let's booze it up, man. Let's booze it up.
We're gonna push the boundaries of it a little bit.
We can appreciate a table beer, but our table beer is 8%, so it's gonna be a real fun table. You're gonna
have a thick table
too.
I've got to jump off, but before I do, I have to go back to an earlier comment when this whole conversation started, where Tim said he could blind pick out a Sweetwater IPA, and I'm no doubt that Tim has picked out many a beer blind because I've seen you drink, Tim.
It's a skill. Yeah.
And with that, I have to exit. I'm sorry, I've got this Belgian beer tasting to prepare for a beer cheese that we're doing that I've got to run to right now. I've got people showing up at my house. So,
well, Brian, thanks so much.
Wish I could stay on longer. Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. I was hoping to harass you to reveal what your beer coming up is that you've been teasing on social.
Yeah.
You've got some cool vintage ads in that. So
is it single intent?
Oh, no.
See? There we go.
It's totally new. It's going to look like something that came from the 50s. So I'll give you that. So,
I'm excited. Can't wait to see it. Awesome. Well, Brian Purcell, 3 Taverns Brewery, thanks so much, man. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
I love you. Thanks.
You too, man. Thank you much.
See ya.
All right, more Belgian beer talk. Brian, he's a busy man. He's just got a lot of things to do, and just got to watch out for it. So we'll let him go. And JR, I think we can cover it, right?
Oh yeah,
I think we got this.
I'm glad he's gone.
Right. See ya.
He was just getting in the way.
He's just getting in the way.
So I read something in doing a little research before this and rereading some things I'd read before. I read that Saisons were actually kind of like the use of whatever material was around. Like we have extra
Absolutely.
grain, we have extra this. We're going to not waste it. We're going to make it into a beer, like you said, for the farmhand, or I think it was saisonniers or something like that that they had working there. Is there any truth to that, or is that just something?
No, that's absolutely the truth. I mean, they used whatever they had on hand, like all farms did. No matter what they were making, they had used what they had. It's they didn't have that much malt, to be honest, and they would have unmalted grains in it. They would have oats in it. They'd have rye in it. It just whatever they had on hand, they would put in and make this beer with it, and it's super complex and delicious.
That would be my wish if I had a time machine. At one time, I thought it would be to go back and see the dinosaurs because that would be super dope. But now it's to go to Belgium at the time when all the farms had their own beer and travel around. I'm going to go by St. Bernardus and grab one of those bikes, and then I'll just go around to all the farmhouses.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you went back in time to that particular moment in time, you might be disappointed. But
yeah, I think a lot of things that people have mentioned is probably most beers probably had a sour component or a funk component.
They did.
Was just kind of the way the nature of brewing at the time.
And that and a smoke component. A lot of people don't realize it's like almost all malt. If you wanted to make malt back then, you had to build a fire, and it got malted over the fire. So almost all beer was slightly smoky.
I like this. I like this a lot. Everything's a rock beer. So
Of course you do.
Smoke and sour. Brian's like, I'm ready to go. Let's hit the time machine.
Are there any rock Belgian styles? I don't know of any.
I don't know off the top of my head. I probably should research that though, because I love a good Rausch beer. It's it's amazing.
What would be the ideal style to introduce smoke to?
Well, none of them would be because nobody would buy it.
Yeah, that's it. It's a
and to be honest, one of the things we call saison at the brew pub is stays on because it's on forever.
Yeah, I know. It's
getting more popular now. Definitely getting more popular.
Are you seeing a resurgence of interest in Belgian beers? Because I know the triples have had a little bit of more interest and a little bit more talk about them. I thought it was weird that just one particular style of Belgian in that lineup of single to quad has a lot of interest. But I got to say that a good triple is really, really good. It's really enjoyable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do see a resurgence in the interest in Belgian beers. Particularly triple is one of the big ones. I mean, I sell my off-premise sales where I'm doing cans. I sell more Belgian triple, or Belgian style triple, I should say, because I don't want anybody mad with me.
There we go. Keep it straight.
Quad and triple, and the thing is, triple throughout the year sells probably pretty much the most. And quad sells more in the summer for some reason. I don't know why, but it does.
Quads are for summer.
So I have a question here. Something Mary mentioned, and Mary, either you can confirm or maybe JR, but is this a real beer or a beer that you'd like to see?
Oh, so this is something they just came out with, actually.
Okay.
Oh,
so
really?
We've got Golden Drac Smoke, which Mary says delivers all the sweet and bready malt flavors synonymous with the Golden Drac Classic, along with strong hints of smoke delivered by specialty malts that are dried over an open flame.
Very good, Mary.
I am very excited about this
today. And it probably is a throwback to older styles or older times when they did their malt over open flame.
I would be interested. I have a low smoke tolerance. And I bring it up all the time.
You smoke cigars? That's not true.
I know, right? In my beer.
He's
in my
a liar.
beer then. Was it it's not Switch Yards. I'm close there, but it's a different name. The one Switchback Brewing. So they have a heavy smoke focus, and they sent us very cool. I still appreciate that they sent us this, but it was a smoke tasting kit that had several different beers, and they listed like this one has 5% smoke, this one has 10% smoke, this one has 15% smoke, and kind of let you see, where it went there. So it was very cool.
I would like to see it if you went to Bamberg, Germany, and what your opinion of smoked beer might be after you left there, because that's what changed my mind about smoked beer completely. And those smoked beers there, fresh, are just amazing.
I think we need a smoked virtue of patience. Call it maybe peace pipe or something like that. I think that possibly room for that.
Possibly.
And I do appreciate the comments about me prompting people to make rock beer. It's like Belgian rock smoothie quad IPA. Perfect. Thanks. Cheers to Beer Reviews.
Hard pass.
Beautiful,
hard pass.
beautiful stuff.
Yeah, JR, one thing I want to talk about a little bit that is Belgians definitely, when we talk beer glassware. And, there's folks out there that definitely say, hey, a glass isn't needed. I saw a discussion just the other day on one of the beer forums. It's like, why do y'all pour your beer into a glass? Because it always seems to taste better out of the bottle. I'm like, and you have to politely tell them you don't know what you're talking about and that, try to be nice with it. But with Belgian beer, there's a huge variety of glassware. I know we could probably chat about the idiosyncrasies forever, but in general, with Belgian beers, what are you looking for in a glass, and what is the purpose of the glass there? So as a visual aid, for those listening to the podcast, is that a Teku style? Would that be considered
This is a Teku?
Okay, a
definitely
Teku.
Very angular.
Which is actually a newer glass.
It is a newer
Belgian
glass.
beer.
It is definitely a newer glass, and it is basically the ultimate beer glass. It's you can hold it here to maintain your temperature of your beer. It opens up in the bottom and then narrows itself for the aromas to come out, and then opens up at the top for the aromas to actually come out. And this is the best beer glass for any style. I don't care what it is. It's just an amazing glass. Now, there's obviously a bunch of different beer style glasses and beer glasses that you can come up with, and a lot of them are fantastic. This is the best.
Like Brian's got an Orval glass, which is essentially a bowl on a stem.
It's
it's
a punch
all
bowl.
the Trappists have custom beer glasses.
Yeah.
And the purpose of those custom beer glasses is to be different than the other Trappist monastery. And each one is a fantastic glass. I mean, it's great for what's coming in it. Orval is open at the top like that, so that because it's very highly carbonated, you pour it in and all the aromas come out, and you get all the aroma in the top. But you could pour an aroma into the Teku, and it will still, or the Orval rather, into the Teku, and it's still just as good.
So I've heard with the Teku that even the lip on that is designed to where it pours it on the proper part of your palate. Like when you take a sip off of there, the way the lip on that glass is designed. So you have the wider bottom where you can give it a swirl, maybe bring up some carbonation, open those aromas a little bit more.
Right.
Then the narrow top to concentrate those aromas you just opened up. And then the lip designed to pour it into your mouth properly. So a lot of engineering into that to make sure. And we have done, not significantly, but we've done tastings of the same beer in a few different glasses. Try it yourself. You're going to see a difference. You will with what you're drinking out of.
Mary just brought me these. I don't know if you can see that. This is a St. Bernardus goblet.
So this is for those that are on the podcast, this is a fishbowl kind of design.
Yeah,
exactly.
You say fishbowl on a
squished,
stem.
but yeah.
Okay.
I like this style. It's a little difficult to drink out of though, because like you said, the lip of the Teku makes it easy to drink and get it in. It's a little more funky. Yeah, that's it.
But we've even got like,
and then we got delirium, and
kind
of the classic Belgian style
or Belgian style.
A little flute,
again,
like a snifter with a bit of a flute at the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we got this one, which is unbranded. It's hard to tell because I'm trying to get in front of it
and remember, JR, that most of our listeners are our podcast and they're not going to see any of this, so I'm going to have to
that's like a
visual aid here, but
yeah, this is a really good Belgian glass. I love this one.
Yeah, that looks a lot like Orpheus when they opened. They had taster glasses that were like that, but smaller. So yeah.
I looked into those. They were the ARC Portland Tulip, and they were smaller glasses, but they have almost the thistle glass shape to them. They're kind of slender and very tapered.
This is slightly different than the Portland glass, but it's basically the same idea.
Similar style.
The tulip,
play with the glassware out there, y'all. Go out and get
Absolutely.
you. If you don't have to go fancy. Like you said, Belgian beers. Every brewery has their own style. Like Brickstore Pub, if you go down there and you order, a Saint Bernardus, 99% chance, maybe 100%. I don't know. You're going to get in a
100%.
Saint Bernardus
Yeah.
glass. So they do really well with that.
100%.
So 100%, they're taking care of you there. But
Yep.
it makes a difference, and it's fun. Fun to check it out.
An article I read online, somebody recommended, and I'm guessing that John's not going to agree with this because he's mentioned how much he likes the Teku, but they said that the best Belgian glassware is actually a really oversized snifter, and mine's big.
No.
I'm carrying one
That's a great suggestion. Absolutely.
yeah, mine's like a 19 ounce one, so I can put an entire stovepipe of beer in there because that amuses me. But they were talking about using like 22-ounce ones, and I'm like, wow, that is huge. But they said it captures all that aroma. You pour the whole thing in. You got so much room for swirling and for the aroma to catch. And I'm like, I'd never thought of that. And I do like the oversized snifter. So apparently my snifter is still too small.
Brian's tiny.
My only
snifter.
thing is I don't know who expects beer to last that long, because if I pour it into a
Yeah.
glass, it's getting consumed.
It's done. We got a comment here that says, I guess that means no Belgians out of a solo cup. But if you put the solo cup on a stem, it's totally fine. Yeah. Absolutely fine.
Makes it classier.
So that's it. That's all you got to do.
Just put a little
Absolutely.
tape around the inside to just kind of like consolidate some of the aroma, and you'll be fine. Like duct tape, something like that. It'll be classy. It'll be great. You'll love it.
So
won't
Nate
at all.
has been way too quiet this whole show here. He's just sitting and staring at us. So Nate, what is your favorite Belgian beer?
I really like a single. The bready yeasty malt. Sorry, that's a whole lot of words. The bready yeast flavor out of like a double or a quad can be a little too overbearing for me. So a single is usually where I stick my lane in.
I had Saint Bernardus does a Pater's beer that I haven't seen that much, but I've tried, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I had a friend that brewed one time, and I'd love to find more of those because I did really dig it. I thought it was, again, lower on the alcohol, so I can't I won't overdo it, or it's harder for me to overdo it.
It's good for the children.
Good for the children like me, the youngins like me and Brian.
The youngins like
have
that.
the Pater's beer, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
oh man.
Earlier when I was giving Brian Purcell the business about his beer release, I was taunting him, trying to get him to say it was Single Intent. Single Intent was his Belgian single. It was I think it was a Belgian pale ale is what it was classified officially as, but for a long time that was one he did, and it has a huge cult following. I know that for a while, if somebody showed him a bottle, he had to there was some sort of a ritual with it where he drank the entire beer or something like that, and it was a whole lot of fun. And I was thinking maybe he was bringing that back. So, but you know what? A single is, I think it's a cool idea, and I'm surprised we don't see more of them out there.
I'm calling it he's giving us a dad beer. I mean, the 50s kind of playing around in that, maybe he's bringing back hams or not.
Well, hams is still here.
That would be my guess.
That's so, but I'm thinking we're going to have us a dad beer, which I am insanely excited for, hoping I'm right on this one. So I think he said Saturday is the reveal. So we'll have to keep an eye out to see when that comes across. But so JR, a little chatter on the ones we kind of pushed to the side, the lambics, the gooses, your Flanders, all of those. So I kind of group all those together. Some differences, but that's kind of the sour, wild side of Belgian beer. So
A little bit, yep.
So my understanding, a lambic is the beer that is brewed, and then a goose is a blend of lambics, correct?
Yes, in a way. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
The lambic is a wild fermentation. They brew the beer. They put it in a cool ship, which is a large rectangular container that's put at the top of the building where it's cold at night and literally left out at night to cool down, and then they bring it down into the fermenters, and that's the only method of pitching yeast they have. And of course, during that process, as it cools, it picks up different microflora that help ferment the beer out, and then it goes into barrels or into foeders and ferments for at least a year to become a lambic. the goose is a blend of lambics. There's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, that becomes blends of goose, and then you can have creeks, framboise, the different fruited versions of lambic that you can do from there.
I think the most like you said, creek or cherry, framboise, raspberry. I think probably
Mhm.
behind that maybe peach.
Peach,
Probably coming in there, but
Mhm.
I've seen blueberry. Brian, we talked just recently about the grape, the one
The
that
grape,
did the
yeah.
wine
Oh
grapes, the
yeah,
dry Fontaine and such. So
absolutely. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with fruit.
Is because I see creek sometimes mentioned, and I see oud creek. Is oud creek like a goose, like a blend, and like a regular creek just a lambic with fruit, or are they kind of synonymous? Because I've never known if there was like a distinction between creek and oud creek.
It's kind of a synonymous thing, but oud creek means it's a blend typically. Different people, I mean, different again, because Belgium doesn't really have any hard guidelines on this stuff. They can kind of freely use their names for that.
Belgium's do as you please mentality out
A
there,
little
huh?
bit,
Just make it, enjoy it.
unless
But
you call it lambic and you're not from the lambic region, then they
right,
can.
Then they have
then we
issues with
have to
that.
talk about it. But that's like lambic, like unblended lambic. You know, getting that you don't see that a lot, or it is specifically marked as such. If it is to say, hey, this is coming from
Yeah,
one barrel, because I think it is Jr. You may not get the exact same results out of every one, so blending is a common part to get a flavor profile.
oh,
Correct?
you definitely won't get the same
Right.
flavor
Yeah.
profile out of different batches. I mean, Cantillon will tell you, like, you go there, it's like, oh well, ours is a natural process, so it's going to be different every time, and it is. And so, I mean, lambics the most trust you have in making beer, because you make the wort, you mash the malt, you create the wort that makes the beer, and then the rest is up to God, basically.
Put it in his hands.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
all right.
And then there's a lot of technique and tradition in that, but that's basically what you've got. And that's one reason that Belgium is so good at it, because their climate is such that you what you want to do is always make the lambics in the cooler months, and at the end of the cool months they don't brew anymore. They just wait till the next year, and they put it all down to rest, and the rest is up to again God at that
It's in
point.
God's hands.
Well, at least yeast gods. So
The yeast gods, the
the
old
yeast,
gods and the new.
or the microflora gods in this case. But
Before we move off the topic of gooses, I do hear a lot about 1, 2, and 3 year old blends of lambics. Does it get beyond that, or is it typically just the 1 through 3?
there are some later blends of that, but the traditional methods are 1, 2, and 3. Much past that, there's really not much need to age it much longer. My good friend Wayne Womble said, like, if we could just figure out a way to get those things into a regular beer without it affecting the flavor, you could ship the beer to Mars and back, and it would be exactly the same, because after a certain point, the beer won't change anymore.
Ah, I see. Okay.
It's fun to see that. You know, we had Orpheus Brewing did the method traditional. You know, the 1, 2, 3 year. They had a cool ship there, one that was kind of put together from some equipment. A little later on, Monday Night Brewing, when they built their garage location, they actually put a spontaneous room, I guess you would. They called it the crunk ship, but they had their purpose-built cool ship there that they could turn fans on when the temperature's right and actually draw the air through there to get the right
Right.
microbes in there. And
Yeah.
I've heard that. I've heard a lot of people, like from Cantillon, mention that you can see the steam rising and like hitting the rafters and dripping back. That the culture's
Right.
living in the room there, not just in the air, but in the brewery itself as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been to Cantillon, and I've seen seen the conditions, which are a bit appalling to a regular brewer.
Yeah, so you
But-
don't want to see it. So
Yeah. I mean,
we do want an infection here.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, you go to the brew house and it's like just all this stuff's all over the floor. I've been there right at the end of brewing season. It's like, yeah, we'll take care of that when it's all done. And then you go up into the fermentation cellar or the cool ship cellar, and everything's you think about things like, oh, well, we don't clean anything up here, but yeah, they do. It's clean,
Yeah.
but they keep the natural flora and everything going, and that's kind of the difference between doing it here and doing it there. Is like we have to kind of imitate what they do. Theirs is just natural. It just happens by itself.
It's pretty cool, man, to see, what comes out of that. I know Cantillon gets a lot of the hype. That, when you say Lambic or Goose, they're probably the ones there. I personally have a preference for the profile of the Dre Fontaine.
Me too.
Yeah, that's just me. I know Cantillon gets it, but JR, question for you here. One that we've got in the chat from good old ATL 6245. If we're recommending a lambic to try, what would you recommend? And I did clarify that they're asking for like a good unblended lambic. If you want to get the raw goodness, which one would you recommend?
Well, I mean, Dre Fontaine is probably my favorite. I mean, certainly Cantillon is great, but there's so many. There's just not that many available in the United States, unfortunately.
I think I've seen. Is there one from Cantillon? If I remember right, I think it's actually called 100% Lambic Bio, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
that is
that's a great one.
So,
Yeah.
so that would be a good one. Cantillon, not easy to find. Not easy to find. I don't think a lot of these are going to be, but
No.
I know Atlanta sees a decent drop of Dry Fontaine and stuff.
We
Sporadically.
do. Thanks
So,
to Liberator.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you very
Liberator.
much,
We
Jason.
appreciate you. We appreciate.
Do we get a
Absolutely,
lot of
we do.
unblended stuff though? Because it seems like a
It's
lot of what
mostly
I see
blended.
is blended. So
Yeah, I
We
mean,
got yeah.
to be honest, the blended stuff is really kind of what you want. I mean, the straight up lambic is generally still, which it freaks most people out because you're not used to still beer. But the blended stuff is really
Yeah,
It's
the
lambic can
unblended
be.
is. Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. It's if you're on, try to throw in the mix there, but you're probably gonna get better drink out of a nice blend. Where they
Oh, absolutely, and that's the way it really.
go to a brewery with a sour program. Sometimes you'll see they'll not blended. I know Orpheus did that occasionally when they had to go out. It's kind of rare, but and see who's got a sour program, and they're gonna know if something is like enjoy this. And,
Right.
like
Hey,
there's gonna be a lot where they couldn't.
I mean, we have style that we've put out that's a single, well, but it's also Solarids, so it's been going. Take 2/3 of the beer out and then put another 2/3. And this last batch we had, and the intention for blending with other things, but this last one was just called Angels in the Architecture.
Nice. If I come down from the Solera,
Sure, yeah, I'll put you. You can just lay down on the ground and.
I
Good
love
deal.
the Solera concept. I know
knew
that originates from, was it rum or sherry or something like that? Have been doing that.
Yeah, from rum and sherry, but more from.
Oh,
okay.
well, those are good too.
And it's we do a Solera style. It's not quite, but it works very well.
Okay, one more JR for you here. Let's talk. I'm gonna toss these. Flanders Red, Oud Bruins, those kind. What should we expect in those?
Well, they're both. I like that.
Monk Flanders Red right now.
Just kind of visual cues to get him
The Flanders Red is my favorite. Very similar. The Oud Bruin being slightly dark. The Flanders Red, it can come in a lot of forms. So you can have straight up the basic beer that's been fermented out, and it's like Duchess de Bourgogne. I think he's already got that. But it's blended with. There we go.
He's got his bottle now too.
I got mine now. With sour cherries and character. And the thing about these beers is they leaning more towards the lactobacillus. There's a little bit of Brett in it, but it's very distinctive. And you either get your characters cherries out of whatever fruit you're adding to them. You can add and or combinations. Produces this very complex beer. It's based in a beer form. I've had a lot of communication from Max Lagers that was done and dry mission figs, and one was in a Pritchard's rum barrel. Won a couple of medals at GABF with that. It's just a spectacular style. I think it's very underrated, and a lot of people.
I agree.
Yeah, in general, I think it's Rodenbach, maybe Rodenbach Red.
Yeah.
It's cough drops. I got to say that one was just in that one. I was like, all right, guys.
That's because
some of those are back sweetened, right?
Yeah, they're back sweetened. Those beers are point, and they've been back sweetened to try to make them more palatable for. I don't like those at all. Natural, straight up version.
Big old term for one that's I think I'm thinking of it wrong, but there's something that is like it's back sweetened. It's part of the style.
Yes, I've heard of that.
What I'm talking about there?
Yeah. Came up, but
is it Lindemans?
It could be.
Does it rhyme?
The Mindemans? Does it rhyme with Mindemans?
Yeah. It used to be a great style, and now it's just really sweet.
Are these blended, or are you going more pure thing? More closer to like a lambic approach.
Much the way we do the Solera at Bold Monk. They take young beer and blend it with older beer. They do it after fermentation because they have the capability. 2 or 3 year old Flanders and blend it with a younger, more body and more character and more complete. It's basically the same thing as that they do with lambics.
During the fermentation phase, you're blending?
Well, we do it in the fodder. We'll finish fermentation, then we pull barrels, and then put the finished beer within there.
Okay.
It's very similar, but it's not quite the same.
Is there gonna be a still Flanders coming out from you? Like a box in a bag?
A box in a
box. Sorry, the other way around.
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's. But maybe.
We still talk about in Colorado that was their Glue Creek. and it was a bag in a box. Still, it's delightful. Loved it. So
we did a little beer recently, and the guy from Brewery a box of beer, and he says, "Hey, you want to try this?" And like mouth, I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I opened my mouth for it, and I drank. You need to give me more of that.
yeah, keep going, keep
It
going.
was kind of a peach version.
But most people, kind of like you said, JR, they're not ready for this. Or they just don't care for it. Plain. JR, what is next for Bold Monk? What have you been in the beer business like 60? Somewhere around there. Him out of the chair. Not him out of the
fall
chair.
asleep or die.
Yeah.
I don't know which.
Well,
but is there anything that you want to brew that you haven't brewed yet?
I brewed a beer de garde this year. I'd never brewed that, so maybe I can die now. I don't know.
That's it. It's finished.
Have you done a grisette?
No, there's a lot of beers. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
Plenty to brew. Any other questions? I think we've maybe not all the topics rush on Belgian beers here tonight. So definitely enough that if you experience Belgian beers, you know where to start and check them out.
It's kind of a dumb question I've never looked into, but when you see because that's typically what I see, you usually see like 1920, 2017. What does that mean? It's those dates mean?
It's the bottle on date that for in the bottle. That's the date they put on it.
Blended to bottle. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I just never looked into it. Coming into this, exactly what it meant.
Yeah.
We appreciate you and Brian Purcell, who had to drop with other people. We understand that happens. But, JR, thanks so much for joining. Guested on another podcast this week that's coming out in a couple. But I know I've mentioned this to you before, but that's the first place I ever drank craft beer in Georgia.
Yeah.
Went out there when you opened. And then, you and I hung out. We celebrated your 20th anniversary together there. So it's a place I've been drinking for 25 years, and time.
It's a long time.
It is. Many years and many beers. Appreciate you
You're
chatting
welcome.
with us tonight.
Thank you.
I think this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show, we'd have had a great time talking. For more craft beer info, you just need to follow us online. We are Beer Guys on Instagram. If you dig what we're doing here, please consider some perks there. You'll get the shows a little earlier than other folks. And you can get on the Discord server and chat beer with week long. So thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to drink local. Cheers. Good stuff. Good stuff. Also, let's see. We got another comment here.
Love
Bold Monk. Excellent brewery. Those are facts there. We went down after the festival last weekend. Down in the restaurant. And what's the Belgian version of the English sausage roll? Is it Brabant? I dig those. Meat in pastry, pretty much I'm in. I've said before, I wish, and it just seems like America, these would be so popular that just some kind of What
Uh,
else you got?
Pigs in a blanket.
Okay. But
do
more
burgers,
places don't do
too.
those, though.
Yeah.
And that's
but
not the
we're
same as
lazy.
the
We don't
pastry.
want to have to do all this stuff. We just get the bread pre-made the American way. Like,
I
I don't
we
know
can
that
do the
that's
pastry,
easier,
but
man. Easier than rolling some stuff in a pastry and tossing it in the oven.
nah.
But
yeah.
they, we see, I forget, is it Heaps is the name of the little pie joint that we see at a lot of the breweries and beer events
Oh yeah,
here?
yeah.
But they do like I think it's
meat
the New
pies.
Zealand style hand pies, and they do like a sausage roll and stuff. But I
I got to
wish,
tell you, I had a New Zealand hand pie when we were there. It's like
Yeah.
the very last day. I was like, why have I not been eating these the whole time? It's
See?
delicious.
that's what I'm saying. I think that more of our breweries and bars and breweries and that, I'm just surprised more of them don't have something like that on the menu because it just seems like it. Like
It's
up
a
in Michigan,
no-brainer.
they got the pasties that they
Yeah.
do up there,
Well-
but it just hasn't made it out.
Yeah,
It's like a mini calzone, kind of, except
Yeah.
it's not Italian.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's completely different, but just like
It's
it, except
completely
completely
different.
different.
Insane.
Exactly. Y'all, we're going to end the live stream now. For our Patreon supporters, we are going to put a link to this. If you want to join us for the after party, this will go in our Discord chat for all of our Patreon supporters. You can come hang with us for a little bit. But thanks for tuning into this live show, and we will catch you next week. Cheers.